Well, hello there, and welcome to another episode of Certified Forgotten. Hey, this is another episode where, unbeknownst to our listeners, Donato rediscovered the soundboard in our podcast editing tool and has been, oh God, he's actually doing it on the live. So there you go. If you were going for like a J horror, like we've exorcised the demon kind of vibe, you've got that tinkly little piano there to bring you home. Oh, Jesus Christ. I am, as always, one of the Matts, the Matt that doesn't fuck with the soundboard, Matt Monagle. I am joined by my partner in crime, Matt Donato. It is a new year, but it is most certainly not a new Donato. How are you doing, friend?
Doing great. Can't believe it's 2023 and I still have control of the sound effects.
I really should not have moved all of the login credentials under your name. This has
No,
been super duper bad for me.
I should have no control of anything at any time.
Well, I want to say we're excited to kick off a new year of Certified Forgotten the podcast because we've got some great guests lined up and we've got some great movies that we want to talk about. We also are in a very privileged position to be able to bring back a few familiar faces, especially folks that helped us get the podcast off the ground when it was just a twinkle in the eye. And we are returning one of our real life friends, a jack of all trades when it comes to the horror genre, to the podcast today. Donato, will you please do the introduction here?
Yeah, I think it's very fitting that we're starting the new year with this episode too, because number one, I will give our guest a little credit. I think The Last Will and Testament of Rosalind Lee is one of my, if not one of my favorite movies I've discovered through doing the podcast, which is, why we do this. We want to discover these little gems that have flown under the radar. But also episode 9, which was very early in our stages of being a podcast, as Monagle just said. I think that, again, it is either the first episode where somebody brought a movie to us, or it is like the second episode where someone brought a movie to us. And like, that was the one where we clicked and we're like, wait, these conversations are way better when the guest brings like their enthusiasm and the guest brings a movie to us. So like literally did shape the trajectory of the podcast. So we bring back with thanks, Mr. Brad McHargue, the host of the co-host of Fright or Wrong Denver Horror Trivia, the owner, let's say, of Suburban Ghost with Becky Sayers, who has also been on the podcast as well, which brought us a great movie. Also host a Telluride Horror Show. And if you saw a good movie, he probably recommended it. If you saw a bad movie, he didn't.
Well, thank you so much for that introduction, Matt, and I'm so happy to be back.
Yeah, it's great to have you back, and it's been a really busy year for you in 2022, in particular, Brad, because this was just is a little bit of an anchoring device. I don't want to skip ahead to talking about The Interior, but The Interior is a film that is, I think, very representative of the last decade in horror distribution, and playing on the festival circuit, building up kind of word of mouth, working with filmmakers that were making the leaps from short to features. And it's such a fascinating model that has really set the stage for like how a lot of people try and get their films made today. And Brad and his partner Becky, for those that aren't familiar with their work, business and life partner Becky, are working on and have been working on a feature for their script that this year as a short did make the festival circuit round. So that's my anchor. And I want to talk about Bringing Up the Ghost for the first half of our show today. I just want to kind of like talk about how that experience has been for you and what it's been like to, and I know this isn't the first time that you've had stuff that's been out in the ether, but like really, production company, creative partnership, like the thing. This is the first thing that I feel like is probably what you want to be remembered for, the type of work that you want to be putting out there. So talk to me a little bit about the origins of Bringing Up the Ghost.
Yeah. It's weird. The seed of the idea began when I was laying in bed one night, and I thought it'd be really weird if my dresser drawer opened on its own. And I don't know how. I mean, that's okay, whatever. But that somehow spun its way into Pet Ghost, and it evolved. I think the idea came out in like the idea came into my head in like 2015, 2016. And then it just kept evolving and evolving. And then it really kind of hit its stride as a script when I met Becky. And she and I dove right into making movies as much as we could. First thing we ever shot together was it was a bumper that was never used for the Telluride Horror Show. And we did a little short with a GoPro in her old house up in Seattle. But everything started to click to get to the Suburban Ghost part with we submitted, so she helped me for about 3-4 months in 2019 really dial in the script and get it to where we wanted to get it as a feature. and we submitted it to the Frontiers International Co-Production Market uh, as part of Fantasia in 2019. And that's when we decided to form Suburban Ghost strictly under the banner of Giving Up the Ghost. And we didn't make it in, unfortunately, but we were shortlisted, which was really, really cool. You go into this for the first time ever. You have no idea what's going to happen. And I never in a million years thought we would get in. Like the script has undergone a lot of changes since then. I've worked on it, workshopped it, gotten feedback, and made some updates to it. But anyways, it didn't get in, but we went and met a lot of people. We hung out a ton in Fantasia. It was awesome. But that was the seed sort of for Suburban Ghost. And since then, Becky and I have just been trying to churn out as many shorts as we could. The first official one we did was shot actually in 2019 before we went to Fantasia, I believe. That one also happened to involve a ghost in a sheet because I apparently have a thing. But it was called There's a Ghost in the House, and it was just a surreal relationship thing involving a ghost, just watching a couple unfold. It actually premiered at Fantasia during COVID, during lockdown.
Mm.
So our very first big short that had a cast and a crew and all of that ultimately flew under the radar. I played a lot of online festivals and stuff like that, which was great. I actually had people come up to me at the in-person version saying, "Hey, we absolutely loved it." So that was really cool. But since then, we've just been making little shorts here and there, holiday shorts. Every Halloween and Christmas, we do a short, and then sometimes we'll come up with an idea and just do something. But I decided to kind of take it back to square one. We really wanted to move forward with a real production as opposed to just me, her, and a friend shooting it. Um, and we had a variety of ideas that we didn't know what we wanted to do with. So I was like, I could easily turn Giving Up the Ghost into a short. I've got kind of the idea on how to condense it all. So we decided to roll with it both as a short film and as a feature, or as a proof of concept for the feature. Cast and crew, 3-day shoot. We did pickups like a month later. Got great guy for some VFX. Our we have mutual friend Jerry Smith did the score, phenomenal score, and yeah, it ended up getting into about like 10 festivals, and holding out for a couple more. Holding out for Overlook, submitted to that one. So fingers crossed there. But now we're like moving on to new shorts. But at the same time, once the festival circuit is done, I hope to shoot a pitch video and attempt a Kickstarter or a GoFundMe or something of the sort, and see what happens there.
Let's talk about the scripting version, because you said you had the feature
Yeah.
length that you originally wrote, and then you cut it down to get the proof of concept in place. There are folks that we think of film Twitter as this thing, but a lot of there's so many fascinating like subsections of film Twitter. And one of the ones that I'm not in, but I see a lot of that I'm really fascinated by is screenwriting film Twitter, and the people that are like working together on stories and like submitting them to like screenwriting festivals and competitions and things like that. So, I mean, was that something that you had the opportunity to experience a little bit too? Do you send stuff out, whether Bring Up the Ghost or something else, to those sort of like writing workshops, writing festivals to get feedback and notes from other screenwriters? Do you find that that's a really, because it seems like these days everybody is using that as sort of the first stop on a journey. Do you feel like that's a really good experience for new writers to have?
Yes and no.
Hmm.
I'm less involved with or less interested in submitting to screenwriting competitions unless I truly feel the script is like just absolutely amazing and is going to absolutely kill it, no matter who reads it. A lot of the features I write now are for me, but also I will submit them in the hopes that maybe I'll get lucky, or I'll send them out to friends I know who work in the industry, who are producers and whatnot, in the hopes that, hey, maybe it'll click with them. But
Hmm.
other than that, a lot of it is for me, just honing my skills and doing everything that I can. There's one thing, the blacklist, where you submit and get reviews and all that. I was initially super on board with it. I submitted Giving Up the Ghost early draft. It was like 110 pages long, much darker and scarier, not like what it is today. And I got an 8 on it, which was insane. And 8 is the trigger to get it featured And then my inbox just started blowing up by all sorts of random people. Hey, I'm a producer, so and so. I'd love to take a look at your script, yada yada yada. And I mean, it's overwhelming, but it's also just like, fuck yeah, this is awesome.
Yeah.
um, but you also get two reviews for free, and I got a 2 and a 3. So complete opposite end of the spectrum. So I guess the whole point of that is write what you want to write, find a core group of friends who will tell you the truth and give you honest feedback about it. And if you submit to festivals, great. If you can afford it, do it. It's a great way to get your name out there. Even go to the festival if you end up placing. But if you don't get in, it's very easy to take that as like a complete and total rejection of your work. When a lot of the times it just didn't resonate with the random reader it was assigned.
Hmm.
It is really luck of the draw a lot of the times. But for me, I mean, I go to my dad. My dad is instrumental in giving up the ghost actually getting to where it is. He's read every single draft. I dedicated the short to him. He's been in my corner from day one on giving feedback, giving notes, doing the whole calling him up while I'm driving home from work and talking to him about it, and then figuring out a plot quirk that I couldn't figure out because I just keep talking to him about it, or the screenwriter's version of rubber duck debugging for coders.
Yeah.
So yeah, that those are my thoughts on all of that.
That's movies in general too, you know, like you're describing the fact that like here's someone rating your screenplay and it gets an 8 to start out, and then you know you get a 2 and a 3. It's just like, you know, as a critic it's the same thing of like my negative review does not mean the movie itself is ultimately bad to everyone. Like it is just, I'm one person, this is my opinion, this is that and that, and like, you know, I wouldn't want a filmmaker like not to make another movie because like I didn't like one of them, you know, like it's very hard to get over that sometimes. But like I totally agree, it's just you just have to keep doing what is important to you and what you're passionate about, and like hope it does resonate with people, because it will. Like every movie has an audience, everyone has a like I mean, you know, coming out soon is Skinamarink on Shudder, and like it is being praised by some people as the scariest movie they have seen in a decade, and then other people like it's going to miss them completely. That's the kind of movie it is. But at the same time it's like both of those people can be right because it's their take, their opinion. Like it is the way, it is a divisive film, and we need divisive films. That means someone's trying something ambitious. But at the same time, like, you know, just because it doesn't work for somebody doesn't mean it won't work for another person. And yeah, like it shouldn't be the blockage that stops a creative endeavor.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I would rather make a movie that has a visceral reaction, whether it is outright anger or just effusive praise. But the whole like, yeah, it was fine. That
Hmm.
like to me that is failure to me, because for me at least, you know, as a screenwriter and a hopeful filmmaker and all that, you want to do something unique. You want to do something that can resonate with people in some way, whether it's the thematic elements or just like really cool shots or anything like that. But just, yeah, that the whole middle of the road reaction is to me way worse than just like someone outright hating my stuff. Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say, as a critic, there is also there's no fun
The hardest
review.
review to
Yeah,
write.
like yeah, the
Yeah.
hardest review, like the least fun you're gonna have being a critic is writing that 5 out of 10 or that 6 out of 10. You know, like that middle of the road, like you checked all the boxes, but ultimately your movie will be forgotten. Like yeah, that is I agree 100%. Like that is the bottom of the like barrel, even though it is not the bottom of the review critic barrel, let's say.
And the funny thing is, like, not most movies, but so many movies are like that. I don't know. It's just it's a weird feeling going into it. Like I'm okay with criticism and all of that, but I at the very least want a reaction,
Yeah.
good or bad. So, but I don't know. In the end, a lot of it, and this kind of falls back on the old cliche with screenwriting, is just keep doing it and keep writing and keep pushing yourself and doing and write your story. It is very tempting to kind of chase what's popular, and even if you do that, you know, put a unique spin on it in some way. But as cliche as it is, make something yourself with friends. I mean, the rustic guys are at like, you know, the par excellence of that, you know, making
Hmm.
movies with friends. And then I know you have like Jim Cummings from The Wolf of Snow Hollow,
Yep,
I
The Wolf of
believe.
Snow Hollow.
And I always see him is like, no, just go make something with your friends. Use an iPhone if you have to. Definitely not as easy as it sounds, but I've been very fortunate to meet and fall in love with Becky and work with her. And she's got experience and she knows what she's doing. She's done features, she's done shorts. So and our areas of expertise definitely complement each other. So I'm very, very fortunate.
Yeah, and like the Paper Street Pictures people too, like the same thing of just a core group
Yeah.
of indie horror, like people that love indie horror, and just they keep working together. And Something in the Dirt, talking about Benson Moorhead, like that is 100% just a passion project between basically Benson Moorhead. Like Dave Lawson did a bunch of time on set and produced it and stuff like that. So like that is the sweet spot. You're just with people who want to see your creations come to life and are passionate about it, and will do everything to help that happen. And again, is Something in the Dirt for everyone? No, absolutely not. But like, is it so quintessentially Benson Moorhead to a degree that their big budget stuff can't even be? Absolutely.
Let me ask a little bit about kind of like how you market that, Brad, right? Because my feed these days is like split entirely between like independent content creators in the film space and independent content creators in like the tabletop space. And the thing that they both audiences really struggle with is the notion that you have to be, in order to succeed in these environments, you have to not only be the person that like comes up with it and like builds the business side, but you also have to be your own marketing department for any project that you're working on. Which is a really unfair ask for somebody that's like, hey, I just want to like work on screenplays, or like, hey, I want to do something else. But it does so happen that you come from a really strong marketing background. That's kind of the thing that you do, and you know, have a lot of experience about how that works. So for folks that are like, all right, maybe I have a good idea, maybe I've even shot like a short or something that I feel pretty good about, that's not the end of the journey, right? Because you still have to like make the effort of connecting to the right people, deciding which festivals are worth your time, building some kind of a social presence or some kind of a web presence so people can like find your name and that thing in connection with each other. So what are some like, what is a career marketer who also is a creative, what recommendations do you have for folks based on, being able to step into that world and not, feeling completely overwhelmed about the project that you're working on?
Twitter, obviously, despite its
Myriad flaws. Yeah.
for sure. Um, I just kind of said, screenwriting contests are like, they're not the greatest way to seek validation, but they are a great way to get your name out there. Assuming you place and all of that jazz. All that's great, but also go to film festivals. Most of us are pretty nice people. Uh, if you come up to us and talk to us, we'll talk to you back. Because I'm talking to longtime fest goers that met you guys at film festivals.
Mm-hmm.
But that's how you meet people. Just start talking to them and follow them on Twitter. That's what I did. I met Pete Hall, Dead Kids Club.
Good book.
Wrote that with Paul Gandersman.
I'm right in the middle of it.
I still need to get that one, but wanted to give them a shout out. Pete Hall, I was a horror blogger. He latched on in some way, and we became friends. And he had a horror blog, and I went to Fantastic Fest because of him, and it just snowballed. So like I wouldn't be where I am without him today. I go back to him as like the person who got me into this industry, however long it took. I mean, I was 27, now I'm 40. So, still working my way up there. And it's just, you got to take your time and do baby steps. But just, I'm a relentless self promoter. I'll just like go on like tweet sprees where I just start talking about my own ideas. And a lot of people don't like doing that. I do it because in a weird way, it does work. It gets your name out there. I actually had a moment, this isn't Twitter, but it's Reddit, which, has its own flaws. But there was a screenwriting on our screenwriting. It was a competition, like a logline competition. And I came up with one that is basically just 5 prostitutes band together to hunt down Jack the Ripper after the death of one of their own. And I kind of described it as like Zodiac meets From Hell or something like that. And that throwaway thing, I called it Whitechapel, I think. A friend helped me with that name. That throwaway thing that I barely gave 2 thoughts to, it was mostly like, I can't believe someone didn't think of this before, won the Reddit contest. Keep in mind, this was supposed to be for a script that was already written. It won the Reddit contest by miles, apparently. I submitted it to another contest and was invited to fly out to LA to pitch it on stage at another competition. I ended up doing a video one because I obviously couldn't go out there, but I also was like, I don't have a script. This was literally just a random idea. I posted it on Facebook. Todd Brown of XYZ was like, "You write that, it gets made, 1,000%." Like this is the type of high concept stuff that people want to see. And I was like, okay, I bought some Jack the Ripper books, and I never did anything with it. Then the Blacklist came out recently, or not this recent one, but the one the year before. There was a movie called like the Ripper Murders on it or something like that. And I actually saw people in our screenwriting. Was this the movie that was pitched a couple years ago that everyone went nuts about? And I was like, no, that wasn't mine. This looks very similar, but whatever. Again, it's not a clever idea. The point of that long-winded story is just get your shit out there. No one's going to steal it. Your ideas are a dime a dozen. Anyone can take a basic, simple premise and turn it into their own movie. But if you have what you think is a cool idea, get it out there. Even if it's just kind of like shouting it into the void, you never know. Good things might happen from it.
And if I can make one follow up recommendation on that, though, it's that if you are going to be active on social media, try not to get as many counts banned as Brad McHargue has gotten on Twitter.
Shh.
I'm just like, if building an audience is part of your goal there, then you're on what, your fourth, fifth account on Twitter?
I had two, and then I tried to make two more. They got banned immediately. So technically, my fifth.
Yeah. I mean, look, as a marketer, I just have to say, getting your accounts banned like that, probably not the best, but hey, it works for you.
I don't do social media marketing, man. I don't want anyone to look at my social media.
That's fair. Well, the last question then we have about kind of the journey specifically for Bringing Up the Ghost is submitting to the festivals and getting, that short film on the festival circuit. This is obviously, it's not over because we're still rounding out like sort of the 2022-23 genre festival cycle. But there's a lot of people out there that maybe they do have something that they're like, I don't know who I submitted to. Should I be worried about premiere status for these things? Like all those things that they teach you online that you like watch a YouTube video and somebody's like 10 things you need to do before you submit your film festival stuff. What are some recommendations you have, having gone through this process a few times, but specifically with this that you're trying to turn into a feature?
Honestly, it's really going to depend on your budget and when you submit the film. Prices get higher and higher and higher as you go through the individual waves of submission dates. But you also just kind of have to use your gut on the festivals you think you have a shot to get into, which is hard if you haven't been to the festival. In the end, you obviously want to stick in your genre the best you can. A documentary short about underwater basket weaving is obviously not going to play at Fantastic Fest unless it's a really weird satire, or by the guy who did what was that, Mr. Oregon. He would probably get that in, but you just kind of have to do your research, see if it feels like a right fit, look at the past programming. Hey, is this a type of film that would play? We submitted to something like 25 festivals, 20 festivals, got into about half of them. A lot of the bigger ones we didn't get into. You also have to understand, like, our short was 12 minutes long, which is hard to program.
Right.
And it's mostly dialogue based until the end. So, like, where do you put that? It has to fit into either a predetermined block of films, like a supernatural block, gory block, comedy, horror block, or something like that, or be lucky enough to be seen by the right person. And then, like, if there was another movie playing at one of these festivals that involved a ghost in a sheet or some other supernatural relationship type thing, it would play well in front of that. Ours played in front of a movie called The Jessica Cabin, and it ultimately ended up being like, someone wrote a review of it saying it was like, oh, this is the short to beat. And then Kickstart My Heart played, and I was like, oh, we're fucked. Because that short, if you've seen that, is incredible, and it played Fantastic Fest, and is absolutely amazing. But yeah, it was The Jessica Cabin at the Soho Horror Film Festival. So a lot of it is the luck of the draw. I mean, they get hundreds of submissions. So work within your budget, do your research on the festival, the ones you'd really like to be seen at, and little hoping and praying doesn't hurt.
And I will say, as someone who doesn't watch enough shorts, and I know that about myself, I mean, the most shorts I do watch are at festivals. And like, that's why it's important to kind of, put, like Brad is saying, put yourself out there, just gamble, risk it. Just, if you can get in front of like festival audiences, especially, A festival like Brooklyn Horror does great things because they program a bunch of short blocks, like, you know, a lot, way more, I think, than I've seen at like any festival. So like you're getting in a short block, as Brad just said, or the ones I really stand out to me are like a Fantastic Fest where they program them with a film. And again, as
Mhm.
Brad has just said, like you tie it to a film that makes sense thematically. So then all of a sudden, like now I'm remembering your short tied to this movie that I probably also love as well. And those are the shorts I think that have stuck with me the most. And it is just like, it's this thing of, as much as you don't want to say you have to be there to succeed in a certain degree, like you do have to be there. It's the conversation of like, again, as a critic, I know I'm not going to get the same opportunities if I live in Idaho as if I live in, you know, specifically Los Angeles or New York City. It's an unfortunate thing, of course, but at the same time, like you kind of have to be in the right place at the right time. And if you're not willing to put yourself in the right place, like that is something you have to think about, you know, like I go to festivals for a reason. I go to festivals because I love them dearly and I see all these wonderful people that I don't get to see very often. But again, it is important to do the networking. Like half of the sites I write for are because I went to festivals and talked to editors and, you know, put myself out there. So like if you're not willing to put yourself out there for this, whatever it is, whether it's filmmaking, whether it's writing, whether it's, you know, XYZ, go down the list, it's definitely something you have to reconsider, I think, in a way.
And I think that Donato and I have talked before. You know, if you are looking for a reason to support our Patreon, you know, one of the myriad of reasons, in addition to the really amazing writers we do, is that Donato and I would love to be able to feature more horror short content on the website. That is an area that fits our niche perfectly, like the type of undiscovered, untalked about things that are important on the festival circuit and lost otherwise. Like we would love to be able to throw money with no expectation at any kind of an SEO return on a lot of these like standout shorts that we've seen that maybe didn't even translate to features, like just really good 12-minute shorts that maybe don't have a feature that follows them. You know, everybody remembers the ones that get turned into things like Lights Out, so those have like a stability in terms of, oh, look at the journey. But yeah, someday, you know, a site like ours, I hope, will continue to carve out more space for that, because it's very hard, I would think, to write an accurate history of 21st century horror without talking a lot about the role that horror shorts have played on the festival circuit. I think that's a feeder pipeline. It's a community piece. It is the, even, you know, not to take anything away from the films, but it's sort of like the lifeblood of a lot of these festivals, because they're going to get X amount of feature submissions, but they're going to get 10 times that in short submissions as well. So it kind of like keeps money coming into the festival environment. And I think there's an important history to be written there. And I hope that maybe someday Certified Forgotten will be able to do that a little bit. We'll see. Last question I was going to ask you, just because I wanted to tie it back to what you were saying earlier. You know, we're talking about the right time, the right place. We're talking about a little bit of luck and having a good project. But really, I think what I'm taking away from a lot of what you said, Brad, and I'm saying this as somebody who will never fucking write a screenplay, never make a movie. That's not, I don't want to do that. I'm glad I have friends that want to do that. It's just not a gear that I have. But a lot of what I hear is Donato and I sometimes talk about the importance of not ever putting too much of yourself in one piece, not in terms of writing it, but in expectations of how that piece is going to perform. Right. Like Donato could write like an incredible essay um, for Paste on his kind of like experience with horror, and he did that. But when you did that, Donato, I'm sure that you weren't going to be like, this is the piece that's going to get a million likes, because you kind of have to, you have to have a really, really short memory when it comes to creating. And kind of the way that you talked about it, Brad, with like having more stuff in the pipeline, I think if I were an aspiring filmmaker and aspiring screenwriter listening to what you said, it's like, don't ever think that this is the one. Always be working on like the second or third script after this. Always be moving on to the next thing, even as your current thing is doing pretty well in its environment, because you never know.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's a great point. Like giving up the ghost, the feature itself, like that's my passion project at this point. I really, really want to get that made, but I'm not gonna only focus on getting that made. That's why I haven't written a new feature since then. Maybe I have, I honestly can't remember. But I've got others I've started working on and I want to get back into it this year. Because I do miss, I miss coming up with those stories and getting feedback, even if it is from festivals or the blacklist or friends or family, whatever. But also just for me, shorts, because you can take
Yeah.
really cool, punchy ideas, you can spin them up in a week, if that, in terms of a script. and get together with friends and shoot them on the weekend. As much as I hate using the phrase, churning out content, something's gonna stick.
Yeah.
Something always sticks. I know. For you guys, it was one of them is Lindsay's post on the Friday the 13th lawsuit. Just absolutely crushed it, and it's sitting up at the top of the results for all that information, for all those queries. To drop some SEO terminology there. But for us, it's like we do it because we love it. We have no personal expectations that we are going to be the next lights out or anything like that. But you know what? We're going to keep fucking trying,
Hell yeah.
and we're going to keep making stuff and keep doing stuff. And we do it for us. We do it because it's fun. The short we did for Christmas, absolute blast. I got to get drunk and be an influencer and then get killed by Santa. I mean, how can you not want to do that? Tons of fun. So yeah, it's just keep doing it. Do it if you love it. If you don't love it, don't do it. Don't do it because you think it is your only way out or you think you deserve it or it's your big break. Do it because you love it. Keep doing it. Meet some good friends who love doing it. Start making your own movies and just, hope for the best. As cliche as it is.
That feels like a really good energy to bring into 2023. As we're talking about like energy to bring into the new year, I feel like that's a really good energy for our audience to take and bring into the new year with them. So with that note, Brad, thank you for opening up your playbook and your history with your feature. But I think it's time we take a quick break and then come and talk about the film that you were really excited to bring, which is The Interior. And we're going to probably talk about it in the context of festival films too. So we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, it's The Interior time. Hey everyone, welcome to your first bumper of 2023. Woo woo woo. I want to say thank you to everybody who continues to support us on Patreon, but I don't want to just say that. A lot of times Donato and I talk about movies that we're watching and are excited by, but we actually have a list of some of the films that our supporters loved in 2022, and we're going to share those with the group right now. Donato, man, what do we got?
If you're in our Patreon, you already know mine and Monogle's favorite movies of last year. We just put that video out rather shortly ago. So looking forward, we just want to see if there's any overlap with our Patreon crew, the people who keep us going and, keep us talking about movies. So I don't know. I want to see what their favorite movies were this year. So we asked our Slack group, if you're in the Slack or you want to be in the Slack group, please join that Patreon tier and we will ask you such questions in the future. But for now, let's go to the results. Miss Amelia, The Menu, Scream, Black Phone. So definitely some overlap there with me with The Menu. If we're talking horror straight up, I think The Black Phone is in my top 3 or 4. Good picks, good pickies. Steph Garcia, Bones and All, which I think we're gonna see Bones and All a few times. Tie between Pearl and X, Scream on there again. I think we're gonna see a lot of Scream and all that on there too. So it was a good year for horror. But it seems like a lot of people like the same horror movies, if you agree with me, Monocle.
Yeah, there was something about the dark satirical, not quite a comedy kind of stuff that seemed to kind of people wanted a little bit of all over the map tone this year, and by Jove, they got it.
And what I like is the X versus Pearl, and it's not a competition in the real world. I mean, I'm so happy that both of them succeed, and I'm so happy they both exist in the same year. I am an X person over Pearl, I will admit that, but I think Mia Goth is better in Pearl than she is in X, if that makes any sense at all. In any case, let's jump to Ian. Mr. Ian has Bones and All. Like I said, we're going to see it a lot. Barbarian and Pearl, so a lot of representation for Pearl there, and also I thought I'd see a little more Barbarian there. I have that high on my list too, so Ian has good taste. You were pro Barbarian, right, Monocle?
Heck yeah. I mean, what Justin Long is doing in that movie is immaculate.
So good. Mr. Shapiro of XYZ. And I say that because he leads with X and Speak No Evil and Soft and Quiet, which are choices I respect deeply because, number one, he's an X guy, so he's with me on that one. Speak No Evil is so bleak and so just uncommercial, unpalatable for so many people, and yet it is so very good to me. It is the darkest of the dark. It is a feel bad movie to the billionth degree, and then to pair that with Soft and Quiet, which is again another feel badder, just the worst of America brought to light and put in front of you. And I don't know if it's really trying to do anything else than say this is our shithole that we live in. Let's revel in that for a minute and try to be better. But yeah, two feel batters for Shapiro. So I hope you watch Puss in Boots after that.
There's something about really nice people that like really bleak horror. I don't know what it is, but it works for me.
Jumping to Christie, we have once again Scream, X, and Nope. Nope is a another one of those. Even could have been an Oscar contention, and I was surprised to see maybe one or two. I would have loved to see cinematography there for Nope. That was, Top Gun not making it, giant snub. I agree, but I don't know. I think that Nope cinematography is considered somewhat of a snub to me.
Nope. More like, yep. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
That's what you're bringing. Cool. All right, I'm gonna keep rolling. Christine, our valiant editor who helps us on Certified Forgotten, goes with Fresh, the cannibal quote unquote love story. Let's say that turns very foul. Bodies, bodies, bodies. Mr. Monagle, you have a liker there in you, and you and Christine are on Team Bodies. And Nope again. We have another Nope, and a mainstream favorite, let's say, for a lot of people. Moving on, I mean, Monagle, we've already talked about our movies, but you gave me an answer anyway. You've got Watcher, Resurrection, and Don't Worry, Darling. Would you like to explain your Don't Worry, Darling?
Yeah, I just think it's really it's it. If you watch the Patreon video, which I would recommend that you do, I compare it to M. Night Shyamalan, and I think that feels right to me. I think that M. Night Shyamalan is somebody who got a lot of grief for a long time about extracurricular things as well as a tendency to do twists, but I think his craft has kind of come into sharper spotlight the last few years. I think he's kind of had his moment, and I just feel like Don't Worry Darling is going to be a movie like The Village, where it didn't quite work the first time around, but in years it's going to gain a little bit of momentum. So if I were buying stock, if movies were stocks and you could like invest long term, I would put money on Don't Worry Darling as something that's going to pay off in massive returns in about 10 years time.
Nice. And then let's move on to Miss Alex to finish this up, and with a little more Resurrection, a little more Watcher. So then you got two right there with you, Monagle, and a Bones and All, just to round out the Bones and All love that is in this chat, in this Slack, and a movie I enjoyed for what it was as well. So yeah, that was another one that I thought might have a little more push towards the end of the year. And if we're talking about supporting performances, I am putting Mr. Mark Rylance up there as one of the best supporting performances of 2022, horror or not.
You know what I took away from all that, Donato? It's that our patrons are very smart people with very good taste.
I agree.
And on that note, thank you, thank you, thank you. Let's go back to the show. All right, welcome back. We are about to talk about the interior, so let me read the little blurb that I have prepared for you. What would you do if you received bad news from your doctor? If you're the main character of the interior, the answer is to move to the woods and become haunted by your own impermanent mortality. Written and directed by Trevor Uris, the interior presents a fascinating mix of office space, into the wild, and ambient festival horror from the 2010s. When white-collar advertising employee James is given a terrible medical prognosis, he chooses to leave his girlfriend and the urban grind behind and live off the grid. But what James finds in the wilderness is far from the peace he so desperately seeks. This film played a variety of different festivals in 2015. It played Fantasia. It played Calgary International Film Festival, Saskatoon Fantastic Film Festival. Don't even know if that one's still a thing. And in a nod to Brad's relationships, the Telluride Horse Show in 2015 as well. So, all of that said, there's your premise. There's the festival presence. Brad, what made the interior of the movie you wanted to talk about today?
To me, it very much, since we just talked about the whole concept of making movies with friends, if you look back at their credits, they all worked on a lot of films together. They are the making movies with friends type. But I just love how so it's twofold. So the first, I think, like according to IMDb, the title card doesn't come on till like 26 minutes into the movie.
26
And the
minutes. Like
first
I paused the movie and wrote it down. It's the 26-minute mark.
the first act is almost like you said, like an Office Space style comedy, very low key, weird. The whole opening thing is like, "Are you high right now?" No. Why do you say that? Because you're holding a joint. When he looks at it, and it's just like you can't help but laugh at it. But as it moves more towards the horror component, the way it sort of deals with that isolation and loneliness, it's genuinely affecting, but it also terrified the shit out of me because I like to go camping. I liked to go camping. And then you have one night in the woods where you hear footsteps outside your tents or the knocking noise that kind of is all throughout the movie as he's laying like trying to sleep. And then just the thought of someone pushing on the tent and just absolutely terrifying. But even to another point, the idea of wrestling with your own mortality. I have very high medical anxiety. I'm a hypochondriac. For the longest time, I always thought I had a brain tumor. So the expectations that he goes in, we don't actually hear the diagnosis or anything of the sort. So we don't actually know if he's escaping this reality or what. But I don't know. It really really resonated with me from just the humor, the fact that he works in advertising, which is tangentially related to
Mhm.
marketing, to going camping and to just kind of want to be on your own for a while, and then just the fact that you can't run from your I don't want to say demons because they're not really his demons, but you can't run from the reality of life, and all done with this almost A24-esque twist style about it. Becky and I were talking while watching it. It's like it's very much A24 style before A24 blew up. Very
Yeah.
grounded, way more subdued. But yeah, and it's just, you know, tight 70 minutes or so, 70, 75 minutes. It does some unique things. It looks amazing, just only using like a flashlight or a lantern for most scenes. In the Pacific Northwest is absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah.
So great cinematography, even if it is all rainy. But yeah, just so many little things just sort of culminated in this film that it's just a tight, not even, it's not mean, it's just like harrowing in a way. And I don't know, you don't see much of that lately, especially with, I mean, the whole like good chunks of it are just very surrealistic. You know, running through the forest, people are chasing you and you don't know why. Yeah, it just, I saw it 2015. One of the producers reached out to me, kind of like with Rose Lee. They reached out and they're like, hey, you know, we have these movies for the festival circuit. We'd love you to take a look at it. I watched it and I was like, yeah, we need to program this. This is awesome. Like, especially in Colorado, it's not the Pacific Northwest, but you know, camping is very big here and all that. So it definitely resonated with the audiences there, just as it did with me.
I want to share one quick story real quick, Brad, because I'm glad that you brought up the medical anxiety piece. I think Donato, maybe you'll remember this. The beginning of this movie resonated super hard for me because in 2020, I actually went to my doctor because I lost vision in one of my eyes, and I also have a lot of medical anxiety, so like I freaked out, and I got an MRI scheduled from her. And so I did like the whole thing. I went in the booth and they put like the like serum or whatever it is that so that they can like trace the colors that go up to your brain and whatnot. And I went to I went to an optometrist after that, and he was like, "You were looking at your computer screen for too long, and your eye like literally spasmed. That's why you've been having vision issues, is because you strained the muscles in your eyes." So it was like a huge relief, but like definitely the beginning of that part where he's like, "Yeah, my vision has been bad recently." I was like, "Oh, okay, I've been there." I was the guy that was like, "I probably have a brain tumor." I'm in the machine making the like the bump 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 noises, and I'm like, "This is how it ends for old Matt Monagle." And he was like, "You need to look at screens less, for the love of God, Matt."
If I could chime in, I actually have an MRI scheduled for tomorrow because of the ringing in one of my ears that started a month ago. combined with some headaches and a fullness sensation in my head, it's like, oh, okay, let's go down the WebMD rabbit hole.
Yep.
Oh, fuck, I'm gonna die. So, little terrified about that. Watching this movie definitely did not help. Becky was like, should you be watching this right now?
Bad
And I'm like,
pick.
probably not.
Bad pick, Brad.
But it's me coming to terms with my own mortality.
Hmm.
That's why I chose it. There you go.
And I mean that does feel incredibly, like you said before, like paving the way for A24 before, if we call it trauma horror, or how everyone is talking about it online, where it doesn't feel meandering, but it does take its time getting to where it wants to go. The surrealism is definitely there in the interior, and like the surrealism married with the beautiful cinematography is what really stands out, because you have the inherent natural beauty of just going into the woods and being isolated and being alone. And then you bring in these surreal images, where I started thinking like The Night Comes for Us, or I forget which It Comes, or what am I thinking of? It's an
Yeah,
A24
it
movie.
comes at night.
It Comes at
It
Night.
comes at night.
Yeah. So It Comes at Night like immediately came to mind, where I'm thinking of just like the idea that you're in the middle of nowhere and there is something there you don't really know. But it also calls back to these movies like Willow Creek, Seder, Backcountry, all of these going into the woods, and there being, whether it be a bear or whether it be paranormal or whether it be Sasquatch, like you just hear the noise far away while you're in your tent, and it's like it's fabric. It's literally the only thing between you and whatever is out there is a thin layer of fabric, and then you start to see the great shots of someone pushing against the fabric, or what is that, or what, like what is right there that you could touch if you just reached out and did it. And that to me is like always going to be the scariest, because it's like, we choose to go camping, we choose to do it for quote unquote fun and vacation, but it is one, like, is it not one of the most dangerous things you can probably do, like, and choose to do
Yeah.
personally?
Yeah. A friend of mine and I, we did a backpacking trip, and we went like 8 miles in. We camped, and we ended up sharing a tent just to make it lighter. We didn't have to carry tents. He's fast asleep snoring, and I'm just like wide awake, and I hear like footsteps outside the tent, and I'm like, it is probably a deer, it is probably a rabbit, some other animal, but no, it's gonna kill me. Whatever it is, it wants to kill me and is trying to find a way inside, take over my body, and yeah, no, camping is fun. It's with good friends, but car camping is definitely going to be more of a in the future for old me.
Well, what did you all grow up with in terms of like, this is a huge tangent, but what did you grow up with in terms of like monsters in the woods? Because in Alaska, the folklore, the legend that we were always told was the Kushtaka, which is a Tlingit mythological creature that is like a shapeshifter. That their mo is that they sound like a baby crying, and then they near a waterfront, and then they drown you in the water when you get too close. So that was always like my dad tell the stories about when he was camping, in high school, and he was like, I saw a Kushtaka, it was on the other side of the lake, and it like ran to me, but I got to the tent or the house first or whatever. And it's bullshit, Mike Monagle. Those are fucking lies. But I'm curious what y'all grew up with, because I'm sure every region has their own, like, the thing outside the tent is X, right?
Hmm. I grew up in Florida. We didn't do much camping there, so we didn't really have one. Obviously, in Pacific Northwest. I mean, I was only in Seattle for 2 years, but I think Bigfoot is still relatively big out there, but nothing like that.
Hmm. Donato, Jersey Devil.
I was just gonna say I grew up in Jersey, so like I had the Jersey Devil, but my parents weren't into such things, like, so I didn't have those stories being told to me. But what I did have was Weird New Jersey, the magazine, and what I lived right near was Clinton Road, which is actually, I'm confirming my sources right now, but like it was all of a 10-minute drive from me, so like we were really close to this thing called Clinton Road. It eventually became like a source for multiple movies. Like there's one with Ice-T. There's another one that like these horror movies about Clinton Road, because the whole story was you would drive there with your friends, and there were multiple things along Clinton Road that might happen. There was a woman in the water if you pulled over by a bridge, who, if you said the right things, you would see the image of the woman in the water, and she would try to like lure you in, and you would never come out. There was also supposedly the one that I experienced, the one that I actually did confront, I guess, let's say, is there was a story about someone driving a car and they hit a barrier and died. So the weird New Jersey fact, or the weird New Jersey thing they would ask you to do, is like go drive the road, and at some point headlights will appear behind you and then they will vanish because it's the woman driving, and she will follow you and then she'll go away. Like nothing will happen, but you will see this woman. And we're like, of course, like we're stupid kids in high school, and all right, let's just drive it and see what happens, stuff like that. So one time, sure as shit, we're driving and like a car is getting like too close to us, and there's headlights, but like close, far, just a weird driving pattern. So finally, we turn, we see a barrier, we make a left at the barrier, and we go down the road, and we turn around, the car's just gone. It didn't, like, it's a pitch black road. This is not a built up road. You're in the middle of nowhere, driving through woods, and if it turned off, we would have seen it. Like we would have seen tail lights, we would have seen it turn off or stuff like that. It was just behind us, and then it vanished. So like that is my one urban legend story of like wasn't facing death at the same time. It happened. It was a thing.
Yeah.
So
I think for Florida. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead. I want to hear the Florida version of this. It's got to be wild.
Oh no, just from Florida, a lot of it is just going to be alligators.
Oh, the real thing that
The real thing. Nothing scary.
Yeah, so I think that what we're agreeing then is that the interior really taps into the notion that the outdoors is bullshit. is that kind of what I'm picking up from everybody here?
Outdoors alone is bullshit.
Yeah, let me go glamping. I have no desire to go camping anymore. Truly, I'd rather just go to a resort or something.
Yeah.
I have a friend who would do camping trips along the rim of the Grand Canyon, and he had one of those little tents where it's literally big enough for you, stretched out, and that's it. And he would do that all the time. And I'm like, no, I have to be with someone, or I'm sleeping in my car with a gun.
Well, I want to talk about something, Donato, that you said, and not talk about Brad's gun, because that seems like a dangerous thread to go down. You were talking about sort of the cinematography and the way that they do like the diegetic, the handheld lighting in the film. I am not a lighting guy. I don't have a lot of experience with lighting, and I'm not the right person to talk about sort of like lighting and then like color grading and saturation after the fact. But I was struck by how high contrast that is in a way that I don't feel like I see in movies anymore. A modern movie would do that, and even the bits that were illuminated would be desaturated to shit. And it sort of surprised me at how beautiful and how striking a lot of those like nighttime images were, just because yes, there's only a single light source, but like the single light source is really like it's not even Blair Witch Dark. It's like you see what you see and you don't see what you don't see. And sort of having these almost like video game style, right? Like the flashlights in video games that perfectly illuminate a very small section and illuminate nothing else outside of that. It was very refreshing, because I feel like a lot of modern movies, it would all just be a little bit more gray tone, and it would be harder to really appreciate kind of like the perimeter of blackness that is surrounding the one little bit of the woods that you can see. It was a really, really nice and consistently well done piece of the film.
There always has to be the strike blue light of the moon coming through, which Pacific Northwest, it was raining constantly. You're not going to get that.
Yep.
So it really played into the realism of it all. So, Matt, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to say it's also such a, let's say, simple movie in the sense that you have one actor. It's mostly no dialogue. It's someone camping in the woods. That's it. Like this movie is majority just camping. So I believe at least, the filmmakers understood that, okay, we really have to stand out somehow. And we can look like any other movie, or we can, as you said, Monocle, like the contrast and like the sharpness of the images and the colors and everything. Like you feel almost first person point of viewish, to go back to what you just said about video games, where the camera is placed obviously behind the person with the flashlight, and they are illuminating just patches of the woods. And sometimes the flashlight will go on someone who's just standing behind a tree, sometimes the flashlight goes on absolutely nothing, but at all times like the focus is on that one beam of light. And how that looks is so important to this film, because if it looked like every other film, there's really not much to separate the interior from every other movie about going into the woods and being alone. But the knowledge and the lighting capabilities, and again, just one aspect of the film. That's it. It's one aspect of that I think makes this film so individual, and like it's crazy that that's all it took.
After making shorts for the first time and working with an actual crew, I have so much fucking respect for grips and gaffers.
Yeah.
Like, not just the amount of equipment that they're working with, but like the little nuances. It's like, oh, let's 35%, we need to like get the little white, the bounce card a little bit higher, and oh yeah, the shade's not quite right on his face, and it's insane. And I'm just like, it looks fine because I'm
Yeah.
still learning the directing process as a whole since I started as a writer. But man, they work their asses off on set, and they deserve so much more credit, I think, than they get in the grand scheme of things. But with this, even just something as simple as that light, yes, you can get insanely powerful flashlights. There had to have been more behind the scenes to make it look as good as it did, and it did so well with like just hyping up the isolation of it all. And to your point, swinging the flashlight around, maybe you catch a glimpse of something, but the fact that if you do, it's not acknowledged, it's just there. To me, that's scary as hell because you're alone at night in the forest. You're going to see shit that you
Yeah.
probably don't want to see, or stuff that looks scary but actually isn't. So I don't know. To me, it's just very much one of the more realistic portrayals of camping that I have seen.
And it worked for me in the realism standpoint too, because I mean, I have not gone out at night a lot, but like I grew up in Alaska. I'm familiar to like really dark, overcast like woods, and I've spent my fair share of time there. And so it connected to me on the sense that like that's what I remember it being like at night. Like it's not like, oh, I can see, it's like, it's not blue light, right? It's not like shooting night for day. It's just like I can't see shit at all. And then I have like with my flashlight I can see whatever's on there. But it also, so much of the movie is not jump scares. I think there all of the scenes where the main character, where James is sort of like looking around at night, the smallest possible fraction of that are scenes where he actually sees something. But it doesn't really matter because the woods at night are fucking terrifying because, like nature is bullshit, as we've agreed upon earlier, when you're alone.
That should be the tagline for this episode.
Nature
Yeah.
is bullshit.
Nature is bullshit.
My favorite shot though of the entire film is when the main character James has been visited by something that night. I believe we do get the glimpse of, he sees this other person often just walking by him, and sometimes this person has a bloody mouth, but this person's always screaming, and that is the scare. Let's say, like, that is the horror of this movie, where it gets traditional horror. But to me, the scariest part, and what Monagle and Brad, you're both saying about the woods just always being terrifying, is we now have James, who has been startled, is awake, it's the middle of night, pitch black except for his flashlight, and he's just sitting in the opening of his tent because he's not going back to sleep, sure as shit, and he just has the flashlight pointed out into the woods, and it's this perfect corridor made by trees, where like he's just glaring into an opening, and there are trees on both sides, and you're just sitting there waiting for like a head to lean into from like a distance, or just something to appear, and it doesn't. But that doesn't matter. It's still terrifying because you're just sitting there going like, yeah, no, I don't want to be looking at that nothingness.
I admire the balls on him for just simply getting out of the tent, even just after hearing a noise. I will hold my piss the entire night in my tent. I'm not getting out. No way in hell am I getting out. It's just there's stuff out there and it wants to kill you.
Yeah.
That's my thought process.
Nature is bullshit. I want to ask a quibble or a question, because I think people are going to hear me talking about the cinematography on this, and then go be like, oh, what did Matt give it on Letterboxd, and see that I didn't actually rate it that high because there were some things I did not like about it. So I want to be conscious of the fact that like we're here to celebrate in a lot of ways the movies that we talk about, but there were a few things about this that I think sort of tripped me up. And one area that I'd like to discuss with both of you is the use of music. This is a very representative film of its time period in that it's a little bit of ambience and a little bit like it does interesting things with like classical music. But I was struck in 2023 watching this movie how much I wanted it to have some kind of like sonicscape that was all its own, right? Like watching this, that to create some sort of like ethereal or liminal space, and to do that with a soundtrack that was kind of like its own thing. And it was weirdly like one of the biggest frustrating points is whenever they would bounce between like a little bit of like electronic and then a little bit of classical. I understood sort of the purpose there, but I was just like, man, if this had had like an original score that kind of had like a few themes that were woven in and out of the movie and created a real sense of like otherness to what was going on, I think that might have been more effective to me. So Brad, I want to start with you, especially because you've gone through the process of scoring shit. How did you feel about the use of music? Am I in the wrong for wanting something different than what I heard?
Absolutely not. I personally liked the minimalist just piano, and that's pretty much all it is,
Mm-hmm.
save for his rapping at the beginning. But
Which we're not probably going to get into in this episode. So if you've been listening, been like, yeah, what we're going to talk about is hip hop life, like, yeah, that's not going to come up.
no, I really liked it because it gave it it gave it the vibe I felt made it work. Because most of those piano scenes were during the surrealist moments. At least once he finally gets into the woods. And I can't seem to find the words on how to accurately describe it, but there is something about the lack of sound and the lack of obvious score and more just sort of like this subdued yet still very intense piano tinkling that played over all of it that really worked for me. I will agree that there are some points like the movie definitely resonated with me way more on first watch than second and now the third for this show. I do think even though it is about 70-75 minutes, it does drag a little bit at times because Matt, to your point, what you said earlier, is that there's like no dialogue in the last half of the movie. Like I'd love to see the script just to see how long it is.
4 pages.
All improvised. But it both really worked for what it was trying to do, but at the same time, maybe I wanted a little bit more. What that is I wanted, I can't say. It's just a feeling you get in a way. But yeah, I feel like with the scoring process, it could have just been a factor of its budget. I mean,
Hmm.
scoring's not cheap. Maybe they did score it and that was an original piece. I'll plead ignorance there. But I felt with the vibe they were going for, that minimalist, just pure piano, running through the darkness type stuff, really worked in a cohesive manner.
Yeah, I think it's interesting as an experiment. I would say like the interior feels like a horror movie that is trying so hard not to be a traditional horror movie, and I don't mean that in a negative way. It just, to what you've both said though, like that the music is so integral to how we receive the scares and the fright. And a more traditional horror movie, we know that's the score they would use whenever there is a surreal moment or when the horror really kicks in. The string instruments would do their high pitched squeal. There would be more intensity, but by using a slower classical music, something more like, orchestral and just with the piano though, you're forced to kind of confront the horror of the scenario as maybe it's in the character's head. I guess I'm trying to get to, like, it's something the character is seeing and we are removed from the fact that this is a supernatural occurrence. The
Hmm.
horror is literally just life. Like the horror is literally just this guy going through whatever he's just been told about his mortality. And by using the score that they used, they very much tell you that, like, no, this is just kind of like fate. This is just kind of the way life is playing out, and you're forced to kind of like confront the horror of that scenario versus if it was a typical, something you would hear in a James Wan horror movie or something like that. That score would then immediately tell you, like, no, this is supernatural. This is spooky shit. There's something in those woods. So I think it's just very interesting how, we read a film and receive a film just based on the music that is used. But also, I do think it does hamper the film at times because I would even say it's like not even the last half. I would say the last like 2/3. There's no dialogue.
Yeah.
And like when I went to rent this movie, Amazon had it listed as first comedy, then drama, then horror. Like horror was like third on the list of genres like to get to. And like we're not here to fight classification. Like it is a horror film. We're not. That's not what we're arguing
Yeah.
here. But you can tell the importance that it puts on a lot of elements. And while it very much is a horror movie about going into the fucking woods, because anytime going into the woods it's a horror movie, it doesn't lean into it as much as maybe I hoped, in the ways that I would maybe be a little more drawn to, I guess to say.
Yeah, 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 no, I totally get that, and that's kind of where I also like when I said earlier, it's very much like A24 before A24
Yeah.
became big, and the horror space, especially metaphor, because it's all it is, it's metaphor. You know, is what he is seeing real? Probably not. It is a representation of this XYZ, yada yada yada. But also to your point about how the music really sets, like the music is so important into how a scene is perceived. And it almost kind of plays out, and I'm probably using the wrong term here, like a tone poem in a way.
Hmm.
Like it's a bigger, more bombastic score or a traditional horror score would not have fit with that character's journey in those moments. And to your point, Monocle, what you had said about, I've worked with having film scored before. It's fucking hard. Oh my God. Because like, I'm not a musician. I adore music, but I am tone deaf through and through. I have a vague idea. I like this. I like this. Here's some examples. I want to use this type of instruments. And working with people who actually score movies, it's like they nailed it. It's crazy how you work with them. It's like, hey, I like this part, I like this part, I like this part. But their ability to kind of really hone in on like what is this scene about? Like in Giving Up the Ghost, there's this sad moment where the ghost is wandering through the house, like looking at his best friend and all of that, and you hear some voiceover on occasion. But it's like we need this like really downtrodden sad thing, but we want it minimalistic. And he did it perfectly.
Yeah.
And it really sets the mood. And like our first short, we didn't know like what kind of tone do we want? Because it could be a horror film, it could be a comedy. We kind of settled more on the comedy side, and I think our main feedback was like, you know how Hall of the Mountain King, dun 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 dun, and it
Hmm.
slowly builds in an almost quirky manner. That's kind of what we want
Yeah.
until this one moment where it turns and stuff like that. And it just, yeah, just insane credit to whoever scored and sound designed the interior because it's absolutely phenomenal. But again, to your point, Monocle, I can understand, and to your point too, Matt, I can understand why you might want something a little more. But that's the beauty of it. Everyone kind of views these movies in their own way.
Yeah. And I will say, just because I know we were using like Hollywood reference points for this, when I say I wanted like something that would give it its own sense of liminal state, I'm talking about the Hagazusa soundtrack. I am talking about like an atonal nightmare like thread of music that sort of weaves in and out of the film for us. So like no James Wan score, straight up MMMD for the entire of the film, which is the name of the Greek band that composed the soundtrack to Hagazusa. Like that kind of like atonal drone stuff, I think would have locked in the atmosphere. But that's my bias, right? Like I'm not going to pretend like I don't listen to
Yeah.
all that shit every day, anyways.
Or like Sun O in The Devil's Candy, like something just
Yeah,
chanting, something just
Oh
feral,
yeah.
feral in the
that would
woods.
be
Like
really fun.
that would be very cool. But yeah, I mean, it's how we received the film, and it's obviously how they intended to show their journey of the character. So like it definitely rings true, and it definitely gives it again a sense of individuality, between cinematography and sound design to a film that again is otherwise just a man in the woods.
But that really speaks to the fact that like this is such a naked film because we watch a lot of horror movies and there are a lot of elements where like I didn't like this performance but I like that performance, I like the soundtrack, I didn't like this scene but I like like there are so many components to a lot of horror films that there's a lot more to pick and choose from. And so you might be like I didn't like everything but I liked all of these things, whereas in this film you have one performance, you have like one style of cinematography, and you have like one kind of use of music. So it's a very exposed movie, and which I think is sort of gives it a lot. To me, it felt like a film that's probably going to have a really high variance in terms of people like it or not, because it's not one of those films where I can go like, well, I don't know if I like the lead guy, but I love these two supporting actors, and I love the way that this sequence was set up, and this particular set piece was really good, even if this one was bad. It's once he's in the woods, you've got about 50 minutes of this is your movie, and if you can't resonate with each piece that they're working with, it's gonna be harder for you to latch onto something. So I respect them for sort of being like, listen, this is what we want to do, and we're not going to give ourselves a ton of a ton of wiggle room, a ton of safety net when it comes to people being like, if one of these things doesn't work for somebody, then like 40% of your movie is gone. You've lost 40% of somebody's attention on that. It's tough, it's tricky.
Yeah, and it's a risk. But it's very much like, if that script had gone out to people in an attempt to find funding,
Yeah.
I'm sure it did, but I'd imagine the notes
Mm-hmm.
that they got is like, oh, you need to introduce this. It's like, you're not getting the point of the movie. And I've had that. It's like, oh, well, you need to introduce like a radio that he talks to through static. And I was like, you're not getting the point of the movie. I'm definitely not doing that.
Yeah.
For giving up the ghost, that is. It's like, no, I'm not going to have this weird, goofy communication thing just to satisfy some dumb need. And if that means it doesn't get funding, that means it doesn't get funding, because I'm not going to compromise. And this very much feels like a film where they wanted to tell a very specific story, something that feels very personal in a way, and they didn't compromise on it. Again, this is all conjecture on our part, just based on this conversation. But I admire that. And these are the types of films that, even there are some where, even if I don't like them, it's like, this is very much my shit. This is the type of film I adore. Especially now that, I want to make something like this, because I want to make low budget horror features with friends. And that's what this is. So,
well, talking about this movie being your shit, let's ask our $1,000,000 question that we always ask at the end of our podcast episodes, which is, where does this film go from here to find its audience? Obviously, this had a nice little. This has a variety review. Like, variety reviews are very hard to get for films of this caliber, so it did a good job of getting in front of people on its initial festival push. But obviously, this is, if we're talking about it on the podcast, then there's an element of its longevity that kind of has not sustained itself. So first to you, Brad, and then Donato. How does this movie become unforgotten? How does this movie find a place in the canon of whatever type of canon we want to put it in horror film history?
I'm gonna kind of fall back on. So for anyone who's listening, who's very into like film Twitter and following critics and all of that, there's this tendency to never say anything bad about a film. I disagree with that. Or like, don't like, celebrate the films you love. And I personally believe there's room for both, for valid criticism across the board. Don't be mean or anything. But with a movie like this, which, it's 8 years now since it came out, it's done its thing. It's moved on. You can find it on streaming. But find those movies, promote them the best you can on social media and all of that. That's really the best way for these movies to find a new audience, is for the fans who love them to just talk about them, tell your friends, introduce them.
Mm-hmm.
Wait for the podcast that you want to show it on expands to 10 reviews instead of 5.
Nice.
That's right. That's right.
Sitting there waiting for us.
Thank God for inflation.
But no, it's just talk about the films you love. I mean, that's what I did with Pontypool constantly. I mean, that, like, just people will watch it, and it may not have a big audience, but it will find its audience.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what matters.
Donato?
Yeah, it's hard because, like, what Brad said is correct. Like, this is one of those movies that is going to rely completely on word of mouth. It's hard to sell. It's hard to really recommend. So someone has to watch it, love it, and just be like, oh, this is so my shit. So, like, if you have the same kind of taste as me, it can work in. And if you pair it with something, it'd have to be paired with an A24 slow burn. It would have to be paired with, like, something along the lines of like a Sarah Dina Smith movie. Think of like The Midnight Swim or something. But even those movies have a little bit more heft to them, I would say, than The Interior. Like, The Interior is so specifically a almost like ethereal experience where you just kind of float through for 70 minutes, and that is going to be some people's whole shit. Like, like that is just going to like make some people go crazy. It's also going to completely miss large hordes of, horror fans. So it's just, I don't know if this one survives on a Vinegar Syndrome release or a boutique release. I don't know if this one finds life on Shudder. I think this is specifically one of those, there are dozens of us who love this movie, and we have to tell everyone about it. And hope that we find the right endpoints to get other people excited, because like just explaining this film for what it is a hard enough sell. So you have to find those comparison points just to be like, if you like this, you should really give this a try, or really hammer on that like 70-minute running time, being like, hey, if you want to give a try as something experimental, here's a 70-minute traumatic horror film that deals with a lot of heavy subjects.
Yeah, and we always talk about, or at least I like to bring up, this is the reason why lists exist, right? Like we think of lists as bad things that writers are forced to write in order to write the things they want to write. But like, if you were to put together a list, which is like movies about people in the woods, you could put Into the Wild, you could put Leave No Trace, you could put The Survivalist, that really good 2018 Mia Goth post-apocalyptic film, and you could put this on there, and that would feel like a very cohesive, very of a theme type list, and people would go through there and discover stuff they wouldn't. So always be looking for opportunities to create buckets, to put, to align things, to create like little mini film canons that will allow movies like this to exist sort of in tandem with bigger titles. And it's the same, to go all the way back, it's the idea of like, you pair this with something at a festival when it's playing that's going to give it an opportunity to succeed, like a short film. You do the same thing as a feature. You pair this with other features that are thematically similar, that people have heard of, that makes them want to go that extra, go to Tubi and watch this, add one more movie that they haven't seen that's already in a kind of a mode of cinema that they know they're sort of interested in. So I think there's life for it. Now I would be really interested to see how this like plays against something like Leave No Trace, which are incredibly different films, but also not, meaningfully similar in some very significant ways.
Definitely well said.
Well, thank you, Brad, for coming on my podcast and complimenting me. All right, that's enough of you, sir. I want to say thank you so much for coming on and bringing us the interior. Brad, I know you're constantly working on stuff. You had a very long intro for Mr. Donato up front. So if people want to know more about your projects, if they want to know more about the shorts and the screenplays that you're working on, if they want to know when your next horror trivia is, if they're in the city, where should people be going to connect with you?
Yeah, so for horror trivia, if you're in Denver, we do a monthly. We have like a monthly engagement the second Tuesday of every month at Slashers on Colfax. It's a horror themed bar. We're kind of like the house trivia group there. We've been doing it about 2 years now. Tons of fun, and we're doing a couple special events. Ideally at the Draft House for Evil Dead and Scream later on in the year,
Nice.
next couple months. But at Fried or Wrong across all the socials, we're most active on Instagram, and then friedorwrong.com. I'll eventually get to updating it. Our shorts, you can find us Suburban Ghosts Films on YouTube, suburban-ghost.com for the website, and then Twitter. If you, for whatever reason, want to follow my fifth account now, it's at mercenary_toast, because every variation of my name has been used.
Very, very nice. Donato, you've got a busy year ahead of you. How do people stay on top of all the work you're going to be doing?
You can follow me, as always, at Donatobomb on Twitter, Letterboxd, Instagram, and Hive. If you want a one-stop shop for all my writing, you can follow me on Authory. Well, I don't even know if you follow. There's like, just look me
Subscribe.
up on Authory. Yeah, subscribe. That's right.
Subscribe. Yeah.
There's an RSS feed. Anyway, so Authory for all my work. And yeah, I already have like 10 reviews scheduled for this month, plus a ton of other stuff. So cool. Just follow me. Read my shit. Tell me I'm pretty.
I will admit, I am one of your Authory subscribers, Donato. I get your digest every Friday with, I have it set to weekly, so I get a digest every Friday of all the work that you've done that week. And I always forget that I'm a subscriber to Authory. So every Friday I get what appears to be an email from you telling me to watch a specific movie. And I'm like, Donato, why didn't you just put, oh, wait, this is the digest. So like without fail, every Friday at like 11 a.m. Central Time, I have this little moment like, why the fuck are you emailing me to, nope, it's the Authory digest. I remember now.
It's the same for you and Amelia. I get I get your emails every whatever day you have it set it to on from Authory too, and it's always the same thing. I'm like, why are they? No, that's right. No, it's Authory.
Always takes a minute. As for myself, you can follow me at Matt Monagle on Twitter. We would encourage you, as always, to go check out certifiedforgotten.com, where we're publishing some of the best writing you will find on movies that nobody else wants to talk about. That's our thing, and we will ride that elevator straight to hell if we need to. Nobody else can do what we do. Of course, you can support us on Patreon, but even if you don't do that, really just like finding an article and sharing an article on social media really helps. We just want to make sure that our writers are able to get a little bit of visibility for the pieces that they worked hard on. And as you know from talking about films like The Interior, some of these movies, there's not a lot of people looking for them. Every little bit of a nudge you can get certainly helps. So Brad, thank you for joining us for a second time. And
Thank you.
I'm going to go out on a limb here and say this will not be our last time on Certified Forgotten. So we'll look forward to having you back.
I hope so. It was a pleasure as always, guys. Thank you so much for having me.
Donato, take us out with something weird, my man.
Spooky woodland noises.
Nature is bullshit.